I remember the first time you absolutely blew me away in the pilot episode. I just said, we would love to have a chant. And you sent something back, and it was so quick. It literally was probably within the next few hours. And it was such a full, beautiful chant. You never went back to fix it or recorrect it or anything. And that is the chant that's used in that scene. It was very direct. It was very thought out and prepared in a depth that I wasn't expecting.
My grandma calls it makavalu. The ability to, with a single prompt, to then be able to do this multiplicity search.
In this bonus episode, we highlight Kaumakaiwa Kanakaʻole, Chief of War, Hawaiian culture coordinator, and music creator. Join us for a rich discussion about the many traditional practices and expressions that were carried through generations and brought to life in Chief of War. Aloha, Kaumakaiwa Kanakaʻole.
Yeah, aloha.
We are here. Really, there's the biggest reason that we're here right now is because you were over so much different things and was a part of so many different conversations, and you'd been around from the beginning, and we're always trying to figure out, like, what do we label this, what do we call it, how do we keep your connection with the show, with the conversations and everything. But it starts way back before that, before this, and really in your friendship relationship with Jason.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe give us a quick background on that. Like, how did you come to even be involved in Chief of War?
It was 2015 with the first dance on the Mauna. I remember that was when I first met Jason, and that was casually.
Yeah.
It was completely acquaintance because I know one male, and I want to go, oh, look at me. Cut to, I didn't even see one thing, and I still haven't seen a single thing Jason has acted in.
Really?
And I think that's what maintains my my neutral sense of friendship and aloha with you folks, because I've never experienced anything you guys have you and he have written and produced and directed. I wasn't swept away by the the celebrity of it all.
Right, which is really refreshing, by the way.
So 2015 was when I got my first introduction to Jason. Again, it was an acquaintance on the level of an acquaintance, and then it would have been a couple of years later until the second stance on the Mauna, on Mauna Kea, when I formally got introduced to him, and he came back to support, which was the largest and most visible of the Mauna stances. Right. And movements. He'd been a part of Standing Rock. He was there for Standing Rock physically, along with some other fellow actors and artists. Then he came back and supported us for the Mauna, and that's pretty much how I got introduced to him and other fellow actors. As the Mauna was closing down, COVID was just beginning, and the world decided to shut down, was when I was offered by a fellow artist and actor a chance to go and work in London at Warner Brothers studio, and at which point I got sort of my second and third connection with Jason after. So I'm in 2015, and then on the Mauna again in 2019, and then you guys were already in the thick of Aquaman 2, maybe at London in Watford, and then we were wrapping up Fantastic Beasts and doing another indie film in between, in the lull, and starting the production of another full-length feature film, superhero formatted film, and of which Jason did a cameo in, and then we reconnected again for the fourth or fifth time, and that's when he sat down and he blurted out. He's like, "Hey, what are you gonna be doing in the next 2 or 3 years?" It's like, "Oh, because we have this thing. We got greenlit. It's a story about our ali'i. It's a story about our people. It's a period piece. It's something we've been advocating. Pa and I have been advocating for the last nearly 7 years. At the time he had told me about it. So you guys were already 5-6 years deep. And then It was after he came on set for that cameo and we talked about it. It was the first time I'd ever heard of it. And that was maybe, again, like 3 years before we were started filming.
Yeah. Because it did take a while, right?
Yeah.
So it took a long time. I do have a question because, when we brought it up to people early on, there's mixed reactions to that, right? There's some people that's like, there's no way in hell that's ever going to get me. Like, what was your actual thought? Like, were you thinking this was going to be real? Were you thinking, I don't know? It's like, what did you think?
I didn't really think anything. I had no expectations. I knew that we had no precedent for it.
Right.
So
that's the big thing.
I mean, you can say that sort of a sense of purity that it was unprecedented.
Right.
That this magnitude at the level of production by a major production, Native Hawaiian written, Native Hawaiian directed, Native Hawaiian produced, Native Hawaiian acted.
Mm-hmm.
So it was sort of, I didn't have any expectations.
Like you said, there hasn't been a precedent for this.
No.
There's no background, no image of what this could look like. I do think, that people have been wondering about that from the beginning. What is this going to look like?
But it's also a film.
Yeah.
It's also a film, and it's formatted for the consumption of an entire global audience, of an entire global media sensibility that has varying degrees of interest.
Right.
And pop cultural references, historical cultural references, etc. On the one hand, I wanted it to be within the parameters of corporate film capacity. I wanted it to mean something. It was a Hawaiian story that I knew that was going to be not reinvented, but had the chance to be reimagined.
Yeah.
It needed to be reimagined for the format of television because to the rest of the world who are not particularly privy to Hawaiian culture or are not born into the life way or into the indigenous experience of Hawaiian is going to be introduced to them as a form of entertainment first. I went in fully cognizant of the fact that it needed that dynamic, that it needed that duality, and it needed to exist sort of in between the parameters of film and entertainment and global sensibility and appeal and traditional Hawaiian expectations.
Right. I mean, that's a great way to put it. I was actually very pleased when we started to communicate because it came to a point to where Jason was like, contact Kaumakaiwa, like make sure you talk to her, see what we can do. That was really kind of the mandate on his part, because him always wanting and me always wanting just to check ourselves, are we moving in a direction that is too far? Are we moving too far into that media sensibility, worldwide consumption? Are we still able to gauge that we're on both sides? And if not, then how do we course correct? And I think that was his initial reason and response for me to reach out to you and for us to do that. But I can't remember if we had this conversation. I'm pretty sure we had it. But when I first talked to you, the truth is I remembered you. You may not have remembered me. I met you quite a bit earlier in Tahiti during a Mahohi Nui festival. This was a very long time.
2007.
Yeah, it was like 2007. And
Hina Lee was there. Hina Wong was there. Me and my brother, just me and my brother.
Yep. Yeah.
My grandma couldn't go. It was 2007 called the Mahohi Nui Festival. Lee Kauhane Lee helped to organize it.
I don't remember.
Somebody?
I don't even remember it. I just remember that was the first time I ever saw you. I remember I saw you and I watched you and your brother perform. But no, like you have to understand. I've said this before. In my career is writing and producing film and all that. And I'm not even particularly good at what I do, but that's what I do. But in the Hawaiian community, I'm really a nobody. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just an observer. I love it, and I love being around it. And so this show has given me an opportunity to rub shoulders with people that I've always looked up to. But I remember watching you and your brother and just being fascinated. I remember being blown away because it was just the two of you.
Yep.
I remember thinking, how is there so much, mana and energy coming from just these two people.
I remember it.
Yeah.
My grandma was supposed to go on that trip, not us.
Oh.
She was supposed to go, but then she got sick, and so she decided to send my brother and I.
Oh.
And all of the other delegations from Hawaii had massive groups, had a full halau, full kaiapuni group. The Tahitians had a full group, all the Tongans had a full group, Samoans, like 30, 40 strong, and then had me and my brother.
Yeah.
That's it. And we were expecting...
You want to hear something funny though? I actually went as part of the Tongan delegation. But I'm not Tongan. I'm not Tongan. But yeah, I have some really good friends. You probably know the Tongas, Walter and Sia Tonga.
Yeah.
And they had so my wife is half Tongan. And so I used to perform and dance, and they saw me performing for something, and they were like, actually, Pa's really good, and we could use another,
Oh, you from here too?
Yeah. So, yeah, they asked me to go, and I was like, really? And they were like, yeah. I was like, okay, I'll go. So I was actually, and maybe that's one reason why we didn't really connect, because everybody was all in different places, but I wasn't there with any of the Hawaiian groups. I was there with the Tonga.
Yeah, because weren't you guys staying, I swear to goodness, swear to the gods, Hina was a part of the Tongan delegation.
She was, if not a part of our specific one.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, no, it was wonderful. But again, so I felt like I was watching, not necessarily from like a group of the Hawaiians with you. I felt like we were kind of on the outside, and I got to watch you in that way.
Oh,
it was wonderful. Yeah.
One of my top 10 life performances.
Yeah.
Because I was with my brother, and I'm like, how are we gonna do this? And mind you, To'ata is their main arena. It's right in their city square in Papeete, and it's massive, holds a few thousand people. And they got these two brownies trying to do hula pele in this massive space, and
it was awesome.
Oh, thank you for reminding me.
No, it was awesome. And this was far before we had the kind of phones where we could record everything. And so I don't have any, good. It was an experience, but that was actually the first time I saw you. So when he told me to talk to you, I was actually really excited about it. I was really excited about it, to be able to have.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
When Jason and Pa'a know my name, I kind of got a reset, and it blew me away. That you guys know my name?
Well, it was one of these things, like we were able to, through this production, really start to talk to some of the best Hawaiian practitioners, like keepers of traditions, and it was wonderful. It was truly wonderful. And that actually brings us to one of your kuleana that we ended up saying, oh, okay, this is one thing that you can do that makes sense, because you were already kind of involved in every little aspect, right? Because, Jason leans on you, and after our communication, I was like, well, I was starting to lean on you on some things. And so we created a position called Hawaiian Cultural Supervisor.
Ever. You think Apple TV has ever heard of that?
No, it was because we had so many different cultural advisors that were all over specific areas. But, we wanted to make sure that there was somebody that, if something was going on, like it's really difficult to try to coordinate all those people and, all of that ʻike. So it could be, we'll talk with you. And if it's something that you're like, you know what, that's better delegated for this area, then, you could connect and kind of do a shorthand and get things done for us. And it was, it was just one of those things that was very necessary, for a production of this size and ambition. And, like you said, it had never been done before. So we were kind of figuring it out as we went.
Well, that's exactly how the dynamic, I feel like, evolved immediately. Initially, it was just some isolated and private conversations with Jason separately, and then with you separately, about cultural nuances with respect to the writing, the script, and then the content per scene and episode. Right. And I would be given, like most people in industry, by industry standards, you're given the scene or the clip of the kuleana for which they're asking you to do and fulfill. And so, yeah, I was privy to just those little snippets and then we had already been tapped. Edith Kanakaʻole Foundation had already been tapped for the adaptation of the costumes. it was a really easy transition to be there since I was already there for the overall consultation.
Well, first, could we just talk about how beautiful the costumes are? No, really, it's been wonderful, and because of the building of costumes, what one byproduct that came out of this that was so wonderful is because there's a sense of elegance to them, and they're not just simple loincloth and simple wraps, like which is what people would expect. They're full and they're layered, and they have just a whole array of colors, which is we're all working within. When I say we, it's really just the costume department, you guys working within everything that is real, right? Like not trying to go, well, let's make something this color and that color never existed in old Hawaii. You guys really, really added the depth that we needed, so that, because the one thing I'm always fighting against when it comes to story is there's an expectation of what a Hawaiian is supposed to be, right? And the expectation is not coming from what we have shown, it's coming from what people just assume. And I have found that people assume Hawaiians are very simple people because, we talk about farming and fishing, all of that. But there's such a complexity and dynamic around politics and, the chiefs and the priests and the warriors and all of that, that the costumes themselves allowed audiences to be able to see, oh, clearly there's an intelligent design, so these are intelligent people.
And that aesthetic and that indigenous or cultural aesthetic is and of itself a vernacular,
right? Is
in and of itself social commentary,
right?
Because it shows what costuming or what a'ahu shows immediately, visually, is, oh, that person stands out. It's vibrant colors. She must be someone important.
Right.
She's got feathers. She's just got a brown smock on,
right,
or a pareu. So you don't have to have any kind of inkling or history on Hawaii to recognize that character means something.
Yeah.
So
he says a lot without saying anything at all.
So again, because we had to adapt Hawaii of the 1750s right until the latter part of the 1800s, aesthetically, because we had to interpret them in a way that was appropriate for television and consumption, we suggested a lot of it. All of that came from our hula lineage. We've already been, as early as 1995, my grand auntie Nalani Kanakaʻole and my grandmother Pualani Kanakaʻole had been sort of pioneered even at a time when people were just doing one or two kahiko performances and mostly 80% awana. I mean, you come to a concert in Oahu and you'd see one or two kahiko and then 2 hours of awana. And then they came along in the early 90s and said, no, we have our mythos, our mythology is so incredibly rich that we don't need foreign influenced musical genres to carry us through an entire hour or two of native material. We have our own material that we can stand on substantially and make it feel like a production. So that was unprecedented. When a Hawaiian hula production of Pele and Hi'iaka got involved with Great Performances, which was a series that PBS was doing for only modern, Alvin Ailey. They were working with Alvin Ailey. They were working with Bolshoi Ballet. They're working with major ballet companies of the world. They're not working with Native Hawaiians. And so a lot of that aesthetic came from adapting our mele and our stories to the stage, to that stage production of Holomai Pele through the genius of my grandmother and her sister, and that's both of it coming from researching literature, going through meleoli for references, combined with their own upbringing as daughters of Edith, who herself was a Native Hawaiian practitioner and kānaka, as oiwi and as indigenous as you can be, to her mother being raised by their grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, Kekuewa, who was George Naope's first hula teacher, one of the founders of the Merry Monarch Festival. And growing up, and seeing those women who were born in the 1800s dress, and how they would dress to go ohi limu, to go pick limu in the mornings with my grandmother and my mother. That aesthetic, the entire of the palette and aesthetic for Chief of War came from a mixture of research, of hula, and a little bit of our own colonial history.
Well, it's one of the things that truly sets this show apart, because it's really changing this idea that indigenous peoples are simple. Like, just the visual of it, like from right out the gate, episode 1, everybody's seeing just like, a barrage of all these different things they've never seen before. But in the escalation of like Kahumanu's character, for example, from episode 2, as we see her placement and movement, the clothes just get more elaborate and just get more, because like you said, she's stepping into a different role, right? So we introduced to her kind of in this position where she is comfortable in the silence and comfortable just in her little world. And as she jumps to Hawaii Island, being immersed into this court of Kamehameha and all of that, we start to see even her outfits just get more beautiful, and it's so fun. And it was one of these things for me that I was like, that department nailed it. Like, they really, really gave us visually some of the things that we need to set the show apart. There are beautiful stories out there of our our Native American cousins and all that, but the truth is to understand that not all indigenous people are the same, right?
No.
Our loincloths are going to be different. Our clothes are going to be different. Our elements change everything. All the different colors is because the people understood, like, they had an intelligence to be able to extract the different colors from plants and dyes, and we were able to do so many different.
We went through as many of, and this was through experience, because we had, as hula practitioners, and because we had generation after generation been born into it. There a lot of these practices that people come to formal schools to learn were second nature to us already. And so luckily we had a broad base to sort of reference in terms of like costuming. Yeah. And I was proud of it. I mean, when you have excellence, the degree of excellence that Uncle Rick San Nicholas brings to his hulu, the reviving of hulu at that scale, right? And that combined with the aesthetic that we developed with the costume department, we couldn't have done any better, and I couldn't have been any prouder. Yeah, awesome. No, because it really is truly one of those things that I always return to as a topic of conversation for this show. The other thing, and I have to say, it was one of because we were developing a relationship along the way, right? Like, it's not like we didn't know each other really well or anything like that. Oh, and you know what? To your point, before I forget, one of the really interesting conversations I think we had in terms of understanding where we exist on the cusp of industry and indigeneity is like. Some of the simplest, what I'd never considered would be a conversation ever, but I thought was minutia and turned out to be a really poignant conversation, was they were asking for lei suggestions and accessory suggestions. What can we dress the villagers up to? And so then we had to come back kind of to the writing and reflect back to the writing and then the history and go, okay, so historically and culturally, this is what's accurate. This is what's correct. These are what they had of it. These are the kinds of accessories. These are the kinds of bones. These are the kinds of stones. These are the kinds of wood accessories that they had available. And no, she's not going to be in full regalia all day, every day. And in some regalia, what is an appropriate amount of regalia for Ka'ahumanu, for somebody like Ka'ahumanu? And then what is an appropriate amount of regalia and contrast to the scene as it pertains to the arc of said Ka'ahumanu? So again, keeping in mind that this is not a historically accurate documentary. This is a reimagined. If we were in the 1750s, this is how I'd imagine it would be. Right. And who better to imagine that than other Hawaiians, than other Kanaka? It's nobody's business but ours to have that.
Well, and you're touching on this. You're touching on this thing that, Jason and I knew we weren't smart enough to do it. Like, why the hell are you going to look at me and ask me to do something like that? And I like that you mentioned this the way you did, is taking into account even the character arc, location and all of that stuff. It means a lot because it's also showing how much thought needed to be put into it. It's not just costume department, go do your thing. You know what I mean? They were so cognizant to make sure to consult, with you all. And I remember that, Caroline is beautiful. I love her. Yeah. But one of the reasons that she was so great in what she did is that she was always checking. Always going back.
Well, makahana ʻike, right? I mean, as soon as she got hired, she decided that she was going to immerse herself.
Yeah.
She was going to make herself available as a student of these works, as a student of these hana no'eo, of these artists and craft, of the art and the craft.
Yeah.
You can't ask that any production would actually give us that. You can't ask for that kind of commitment from department heads, but they did.
They did.
That was the other thing about this. They didn't have to.
Right.
The props department head, they didn't have to immerse themselves in it. Caroline, she didn't have to, but they did.
Yeah.
We didn't ask that of them, and they felt compelled to do so because we made it very clear what the sense of kuleana was.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's one thing we really appreciated about. Obviously about you, the Kanakaʻole Foundation, and actually all of the cultural, practitioners, their expertise and all that. We leaned on them actually to let us know what is possible, what is allowable, and if we change this, is that okay? And that, I think that's where we gained a lot of our confidence, was knowing that you guys were there to uphold, that standard. One, to allow us to be creative, but at the same time to understand that there is sort of a base that you don't want to run away from. Mm-hmm. And it was so great. But can I tell, because we could stick on one thing for a long time, but in our friendship and as we were getting to work together, I remember the first time you absolutely blew me away was I had asked you about a chant in the pilot episode when Kahikiri is bringing his army to attack Oahu. He has a chanter on the canoe. Yeah.
Yes. And then we were talking about paus, no paus, and
yeah. But I just said, we would love to have a chant in this portion. And you sent something back, and it was so quick. It was like you sent something. I really, it had to be within. It was like less than 24. It literally was probably within the next few hours, and it was such a full, beautiful chant. And even the context in which the chant was about, all the way to, you're actually telling the story of Ka'upulupulu and just the conflict that was going on. And I was just thinking, I don't know how you got that deep, that quickly. And it was one of my first experiences of really understanding this pedigree that you're discussing and you're talking about. It was unbelievable to me because, here I am, like, I talk about my Hawaiianness, and like knowing what I don't know. I'm not a complete scrub, but my goodness, it was one of these moments that I was like, oh wow, like there is a level of ʻike out there. There's a level of understanding out there that is so deep. And that's what I felt when I got that. I really truly was listening to that chant, and I was very emotional, and I don't know if you remember that, but yeah. I just remember calling you going, this is unbelievable to me. It was unbelievable. And you never went back to fix it or recorrect it or anything, and that is the chant that's used in that scene. So as Kahikiri is approaching, and we have somebody on the pahu and he's chanting, it's that chant that you wrote in a matter of, it was so fast. And
that's right. It was the ka'opulupulu. I took it from, I'd taken some of already Ka'opulupulu's prophesying and a lot of his prophecies and used them as inspiration because it was chronologically appropriate, because Ka'opulupulu was the acting. kahuna nui of the time,
Right.
of the era, just as Kahikilis deciding to take Oahu from Kahahana at the time.
Yeah. But that's why it was so crazy to me. You know what I mean? That it was just like, oh wow, this isn't just some let me do a chant that feels appropriate. You know, generally speaking, it was very direct. It was very thought out and prepared in a depth that I wasn't expecting.
My grandma calls it, thank you, Dr. Kanahele. My grandma calls it makavalu. The ability to, with one idea or with one thought or word and one prompting, a single prompt, to then be able to do this multiplicity search, this dual search in one fell swoop in your mind.
Right.
In a matter of seconds, to be able to recall certain mele and mo'oka'au.
Yeah.
To me, that is at the core of what mo'oku'auhau means in Hawaii, and what loina, or the idea of lineal passage of wisdom and the lineal passage of knowledge, transcending generations and eras and ideas and time. That's how we leapfrog through time, that you can conjure up with a single prompt, in this case, scene, and then recall an entire few hundred years of information and ʻike based on that.
Right.
That's been the hallmark of the survival of Kanaka.
Yeah.
I think the intelligentsia of our Kanaka, at one point we were the most literate people on the planet. We were the most literate country on the planet, with over 2,000 publications in multiple languages, including hundreds of our own. Nearly everyone with over a 98 to 99% literacy rate of the entire country, both native Hawaiian-born citizens and non-native-born citizens, like Tony, like the character of Tony, who eventually comes and becomes a citizen. That is the epitome of what ʻike Hawaii means, or what indigenous wisdom is to be able to leapfrog through time for that, so that I could have been saying it, or my grandparents could have been saying it, or my fourth great grandparent could have been. In that one time, when I recall that one oli, then the passage of time it sort of disappears.
Yeah.
I am my mother's, who's my mother's mother's, who first chanted it, and this was there at the breaking of the aikapu during that. So it even carries over, that kind of sort of sensibility and sensitivity carries off into the idea that when we would use real feathers for ahu, when we would use real iwi or bone or ivory to dog teeth, which were ethically sourced coyote teeth, to the point or even be the conscious decision and effort by the carvers and the cultural consultants to use one real ohia log from Hawaii as the haku ohia, as the main ki'i. The name of the main ki'i was always called the haku ohia, and the haku ohia was the only one made of ohia in the entire scene, and
it was huge though. Like it's remembering that this isn't a small ki'i. Like, no. Not like, you're not going to find this in the gift shop. No. This thing was like, what, probably 16 feet tall?
Oh, well, like 20, 25.
Oh, yeah.
Between 20 and 25 feet tall. And huge. The hakuohia was wider than we could embrace. So
you cannot.
It looked at least 100 years old.
Yeah.
100 plus years old. And you need those tactile elements in the production to ground the production.
Right.
We're continuing the mythology of the human condition. And through this, and finally we get to tell it through the Hawaii lens.
Well, I will say this though, because you say this with conviction that, we needed these things. Traditionally, productions don't need them. Productions don't.
They don't
necessarily want them, because it takes more time. And in this case, we're shipping an ohia log, massive log, from Hawaii all the way to Aotearoa, right? Like that, there's a cost associated with that.
Oh, yeah.
So it's for us. But when you say we need them as, production, as representing production, but being Kanaka in production, then I can say, you're right, we need them, right? And so that's the difference, right? Because it would have been way cheaper and a lot easier to not have, Kanaka carvers coming from Hawaii, coming over, and then a group of carvers from Aotearoa really working on this thing.
Polystyrene is real easy.
Really easy.
Real easy.
And they can source it there. They don't have to ship anything. They don't have to do anything. But
they didn't even have to ask.
Yeah.
They could have made up what they thought was a ki'i.
Yeah. No, 100%.
But no, it is not. It is not guaranteed.
Right.
There's no such thing as that amount of sensitivity in the industry.
Well,
so not.
And one thing, so I met with Uncle Lionel Grant after the ki'i was done, and his knuckles were raw, like they had been bleeding for a long time. No skin on the end of his knuckles. Yeah. And what happened? He says, he goes, when you hit ohia, he said that thing hit back, and because in Aotearoa,
because it's the haku ohia, not just the ohia, it's the haku.
Yeah.
It's because it's the main ki'i of them all.
Right.
Sweat and blood equity is
yes, it's part of it. Yeah.
It is part of the ceremony, part of the protocol, part of the ritual, and the process is that sweat and blood equity.
Right. And I remember going, I'm so sorry.
Because traditionally, if we were building IAL, this was the 1750s and we were building IAL.
Yeah.
That is the amount of the same sweat equity. It doesn't change.
Right.
It's still required.
I remember apologizing, but not in a weird way, but just like, wow, I was so grateful, but at the same time, I'm sorry you went through that. And he's like, no, it's necessary. It's like you're saying, it's part of this process. And really, gone, the skin was gone. And he did mention to me that, in Aotearoa, they don't carve because they have a very similar, I think from the same family. Their pohutukawa is ohia.
Yes.
And he says, but they don't carve with that.
No.
Because it's, for
not their tiki.
Yeah, it's sacred for one, but two, it's a very, very hard wood, But he just loved it. And they all worked on it. The kānaka, Maori, they worked on this massive thing. And it was like you said, it was so grounding. Like Kaina, for example, is already it's so easy for him. But in the shot, when you see him, so like in episode 8, for example, just in the shot, when he's standing underneath it, and he has kukaini mopu, and just looking at him, looking at the ki'i, it is grounded. It is very real. The scene all of a sudden has a new context, for us to dive into, knowing that is a real ki'i. It was dedicated. It was blessed in order to be put up because of its location, because of where it came.
When that was the interface I was trying to get to initially. When we first started our conversations, I was trying to impress upon the process that we do that, the importance of us adding very real cultural objects and protocols and glimpses, or what might be genuine, poignant cultural moments, whether it's the death of an ali'i or the birth or the union of said ali'i, or even the union of others. You don't have to be ali'i. Scenes like a death, dealing with death, scenes like dealing with socio-political negotiations. All of those things lend themselves to because they were historically based, you needed to have some kind of grounding reality to hold you in that time and space. And so when you decide to have these very real cultural objects that were made in the same way that our ancestors made 600, 400,000 years ago, and you carve the ki'i in the same way, it then activates and also requires the same amount of reverence.
Yes. Well, one thing that came to mind, I remember when the ki'i was finished, was, they take a long time to grow. The tree itself, had to be at least a few hundred years old, which means that its time of sprouting or seedling is ancient, is in a time that now we are recreating, we're retelling these stories. But this ki'i that has now been formed from a tree that in and of itself was from that time era. You know what I mean? And now it's been fashioned, it's been, traditionally carved and placed, dedicated, and now the centerpiece of the scene. Come on. I was just like, when that thought hit me, as I'm looking at Kaina standing underneath this thing, in his regalia, kukailimoku, and, council and just, a procession. I'm just looking at this going, that ki'i is from that time era, not just a recreation that we fashioned it.
It's
the wood itself.
The beginning of his life at this very time.
Yeah. I just...
in this very era.
Polystyrene cannot give you that.
Right. And no amount of polystyrene, no amount of recreation, no amount of acting, no amount of production can get you that. No amount of CGI. To sort of comment on a lesser culturally involved part of this process is that I feel like adding real cultural nuances, very real meaning practicing, still practiced, like rituals, like observing of death rituals, like observing of ho'au, of the idea of ho'au or unions and strategic companionship. All of these things, to me, is more or less impactful in terms of the general film industry from the era of when everything used to be on location, and then CGI happened, and then studio production happened, and we can control an environment in a studio.
Right.
And now it seems to be kind of coming back around to the idea of on-location filming, to have real live cultural objects on scene interacting with the scene characters and the actors, to me is no more emotionally inspiring than it would be to have a major production filming on location somewhere for any other production, any other Western formatted.
Right. Well, because it was a Hawaii story, a lot of it is outdoors. It's inevitable. But we had to commit, like, regardless of the weather, we have to shoot, because it's better that it's real than not real. So, like, in episode 2, for example, there's a scene where Kahikili and Kupule are standing at the on the sands, and they realize that Kaiana has fled. Yeah. And they're talking about finding him and bringing him back. We're shooting outside. Yeah. And in the script, it said that it's pouring rain. And it poured rain. Like, it poured on us. It dumped on us. Yeah. And because it was in the script, they thought, we might need a rain machine, or we might need something that at least gives us some, wet. They didn't really want to damage the hula. They didn't want too much rain. But it poured. It poured. And, so it was just like one of those things. It was like, we're shooting. Like, this is it. We're in the elements. We have to let it be. That rain was real. You know what I mean? Like, those guys were getting...
But that's the point. What makes the cultural objects real is the practice.
Yeah.
Is that they're worn? Is that they're danced in? Is that they're sweated in? Is that there's a very clear delineation between costume and a'ahu. And for us, they aren't costumes.
Right.
But very real cultural objects.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between them.
Right.
Stark difference.
Can I mention another thing? Because, again, you were involved in a bunch of other things.
Oh, bless you guys.
You mentioned
putting up with me.
No, you mentioned ho'au, right? And in episode 3, we have this, what would be perceived as a wedding ceremony, right? But you actually helped, set this up and let us know what feels appropriate. And what's really great about moments like this is that universally the world understands what's happening. There's a union between two people.
Yeah.
Now, however, whatever that means to wherever they're from, it doesn't matter. But to know some of the nuances and to know some of the things that is put into the scene just makes the nuance very Hawaiian, so that people get to experience and witness this, but it still feels uniquely different and foreign, and it makes it intriguing. But that was something that you really helped push us through and get us there.
Yeah, I mean, again, everything that I every possible reference and cellular ancestral ʻike I pull from is a testament to my grandmother and and my grandma Pu and my auntie Nalani, and my great-grandmother. I pulled from the typical sources from Keao Mele Mele, La'iei Kawai, Halemano, Kavelo. There are a multitude of these very substantial mythologies that we took, Ka'ilila o Kekoa, and I can go on and on about where I sort of drew both Keone Nunez and I.
Yeah, I was going to mention them.
Decided to use those for that mention ho'ao, but don't really elaborate much as far as like an articulated scene, what it would, as opposed to just saying this person and this person ho'ao. And again, it was both socio-political and love matches. Right. They happen, but not necessarily till after. And in fact, that was one of our other conversations, was the portrayal of some of these. I remember that was one of the things that I was really adamant about and going back and forth, was I didn't want the portrayal of Ka'ahumanu and the arc of her character to be portrayed as an impetuous young woman who has no sense of agency over herself and over her choices or life choices. Because and the reality is, she was the highest ranked of anybody there, of Kekupuohi, of Nahi, of Namaka, of Kaiana, even of her contemporaries of Kahikilima. And one of the things that I had to sort of reconcile with in terms of the writing and interpreting these historical figures was be able to create a viable character arc without dumbing down any of their historical nature and impact and influence.
No, that's the struggle, right? That's the difficult part. It's like, because you're right, how can you honor lineage and yet create that kind of arc that you need? I mean, that really was a struggle that we faced throughout, right? Because especially in the way that we talk about ancestry, and, we have a tendency to, like, for example, if I'm talking about my family, well, my family is great.
What, there's an air of romanticism about it.
We
all think that ours was the great.
Right.
My grandfather was. Right. My great-grandfather was Kamehameha. Like,
right. And there are some characters in our history that we all look at that way. And so it does get a little scary. And I knew that I was going to be stepping into something in the portrayal of Ka'ahumanu, right? I knew that. And I don't even have an argument. It's not even a justification at all. It's really more just being kānaka, to be a storyteller and to tell these kinds of stories. I'm much more cognizant about the impact of it. So when a decision is made to veer, understand it's not just like, it's not the same as if a haole were to come in and doesn't know the story. No. They do a month or two of research and build something. The amount of frustration that we would have and aggression that we would have we're so ready to do that, because there is no background for it. In my case, I accept if there's backlash and stuff. But what I'm really saying is I'm glad that we can have this conversation, because I can say, I get it. Like, I struggled with it, because
I get it. Because it's the whole pitch and the whole script is based on chief of war, not chiefess. And Kaiana, i.e. Jason's character, is the focal point. And so with someone historically, with as much historical narrative as Ka'ahumanu and historical veneration as Ka'ahumanu and Keopuolani, Kaiana was a side note, was a footnote in their history.
Yeah.
And Kamehameha's, but
100%.
But you guys had to shift, that you needed to shift. So, and this is a really great conversation to be having. Why? Why Kaiana? Why not just do it about Kamehameha? Exactly for that reason, because there is already so much commentary and so much POVs as far as there's the we love Kamehameha camp, there's the we hated Kamehameha camp, and there's the he's cool, he's whatever, he's a product of his era. And so someone as polarizing as that would have been impossible.
Yeah.
You would have had a much easier time developing a script about Maui or Maui Akalana or something mythological, where it gives you all the creative freedom in the world to develop these characters, right?
Right.
But no, it could, because if it was done by somebody who Kamehameha, nobody would have agreed. You think there's discourse now? In my mind, that all speaks to part and parcel of that same conversation of, okay, what kind of material do you choose as a script writer? And when you're dealing with historical nonfiction, because this is where it comes from, historical nonfiction, and then being able to, having to shift, still have these very important historical characters in the film and present as main characters, but shift it ever so slightly so that the narrative is through the eyes of and the experience of and the ebb and flow of Hawaiian.
Yeah, a character that's lesser well known. Thank you for... Because that insight...
You couldn't have made a series or a script if it wasn't that way. Otherwise, he gets swallowed up in it. And so do the the scenarios. And we already have a very clear picture of what Kamehameha did. We're the result of it.
Well, and actually, as you mentioned that, I'll tell a quick story and we'll move on. But there was a conversation with Jason and I, whether or not we should tell Kamehameha's story. And we thought about it. We thought about it for a little bit. And it was in our response, which was no. Our response was no, that it shouldn't be done, because I was pretty adamant that there's no way I could even attempt it if Jason was not fully committed to playing that character, And so Jason had to ask himself, like, would I, can I, should I, And the answer was easily no, I cannot play that character. So yeah, in that discussion, in us saying no, we can't tell that story, it was almost 24 hours later that the light just kind of went off in my head that said, but we can tell the story of unification through another character, a lesser well-known character, someone that we can dirty up, put flaws, and...
It's the only way. Yes. It's the only way it could have been done. The Oiwi Hawaii, the indigenous community would not have allowed that.
Yeah. I do.
That's exactly why you did it.
I think we inherently kind of understood that. But, we still love these stories. Like, how can we tell them? What can we do? And that's how Chief of War was really born, was actually in saying no to a Hawaiian story. Chief of War was created because we said no to telling Kamehameha. Yeah. Because it had too much weight to it. Yeah.
Too many generational trauma and generational opinions and folkloric innuendo that we wove in through and through the entire Kamehameha dynasty. I understood immediately where you were going in terms of the direction of the narration, the narrative sides, and the script. I got it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Another area that's worthy of speaking of, because this was actually a big one, is in episode 8 with the passing of Nahi. Nahi Olea. You were very hands-on and very helpful to let us know what a ceremony like this would consist of. Right? Like with the care for the bones and all of that. Do you want to speak to that for a few minutes? Like, just let's talk about that a little bit, because the nuance of that, everybody knows what it's like to lose a loved one, right? But dealing with death, the audience is agonizing at this point over what happened, because now he's such a great character, and literally has just come to this point where he and Heke have finally given in to each other and feeling like, yes, okay, we really do love each other, and they've been brave enough to state it and show it, and then he was ripped away. So the audience is dealing with the death of Nahi. But in doing so, now we have this very Hawaiian moment, with this, how we deal with the passing of a loved one, and, the care for the bones. Like, you coached us on that. But you literally sent a video of how the bones would be cared for, all of that. Even the, that monotone chant that Tiko, his character, is doing, Namake is doing. That was all. It was all you. Helping us to. Now I do know there was one aspect, that you're like a kahuna would be doing that, or a priest of some sort would be doing that, not Namake. But this was that one area where it was like, well, We have just this small family, this unit, and
it's a really fast scene relative to the the pace of the scene.
Yeah. It was such a powerful scene, and it was a way for audiences to suffer along with the family, but give us a nuance that felt very, very Hawaiian. And I think that's why that scene is so effective.
Since 1984 and around 1984-85, my grandfather, my mother's father, Dr. Edward Kanakaʻole, he and my grandmother Pua, and along with my Auntie Ulunui Garmin, Auntie Halealoha Ayau, very young Native Hawaiian lawyer and passionate at the time in the 80s, and a few Auntie Frenchie DeSoto, my Uncle Parley Kanakaʻole, and a few other practitioners had gotten together and dedicated their lives to bringing back and repatriating a lot of the iwi kupuna and burial items that had been taken in the looting of most indigenous burial sites at the latter part of the 1900s, when it was the hot topic and the hot take amongst the gentry to the systematic stealing and thievery of antiquity. And that included iwi kupuna in a time when the prevailing Western anthropological perspective was that the size of your cranium defined your intellect, or the capacity for your intellect. The size of your skull meant how smart you were. So my grandfather and my grandmother and Halealoha Ayau, Ako Kunani, Auntie Ipon Hipali, and all of the other practitioners in the mid-80s decided that was enough. We had enough people stealing our kupunas from their resting place. And it was through that movement and through reacquainting ourselves through my grandmother and my grandfather's work over the last 40 years and Halealoha that informed that scene. It was real life that informed those scenes. It wasn't, the hope is that, and the point for all of this teaching, and we got to teach our people, we have to teach our people. The point is, what my mother and my grandmother had to work at reviving, it becomes second nature to my generation. And then instinct and innate ability to the generation after me.
Right.
So this ʻike no longer needs to be researched. It can be makavalu, like no different than it was of, oh, what do you think about this scene? Is there an appropriate chant? Yeah, ka'opuru. That's that kind of stuff we wouldn't have been privy to in my grandmother and my mother's day. They weren't privy to that kind of information, but their hard work culminates into my being able to do that, and my generation's practitioners and kānaka oiwi being able to confidently stand on our own 2 feet without the need for bibliographies to justify our Hawaiianness and to justify our ʻike Hawaii.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, isn't that something? You know, that's the legacy that I think we would all want to have, like things that we can pass on that become, second nature, and then just become as easy as, breathing.
As easy as, but that's the point. It was supposed to, so that instead of going, has anybody in the past 100 years witnessed a repatriation ceremony or the dealing of iwi? And we don't have to research that ʻike anymore, because to some practitioners and some kānaka, it's what we do. And so their work set the precedent that informed that scene of dealing with Nahi's remains. And again, it's a fine line between what you think is appropriate enough to see and to watch, although they're not real iwi, and that they're all it's fabricated. The process is still the same, and the people and the names are very real.
Right.
And so when you calling up kupuna, even if you're not calling it, just the same.
I remember production really taking that seriously, though, when you were talking about it, the video you sent, making sure that it was being covered appropriately, And in the end, the scene was so beautiful. The only thing that I had, as far as like the scene, like the only thing that I had that was like, was how small Nahi's bones were. because he's like,
Because he's massive.
he's massive.
He looked like on D-line. He looked like he just got off the D-line.
That was the only thing. I was like, guys, we couldn't have found a bigger, femur, arm bone, something like. I was,
It's pinky bone. No.
that was the only thing.
So they didn't think to like to adjust that.
I don't know. It was one of those things I showed up to set that day, and I was like, we have this beautiful scene, guys. I was like, that doesn't look like Nahi at all.
Nahi was born 6'4" and died 4'12".
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, other than that, the ceremony in and of itself, I'm hoping, not that I'm hoping, I know that it was captured. So to allow people to suffer his death, but the nuance is so Hawaiian. That's what makes it.
So that was and I went back and forth with my auntie Hui and my mother and about how much to show and how much not to show, because although again it's being acted, the ceremony is real. The sentiments are real, and you want the reverence. You want that reverence to be clear and concise and indisputable when people see it, and to people to react emotionally in that time.
Right.
That was probably the scene I was dreading the most about, but at the same time look forward to, because I think it's going to be one of the most impactful.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It was hard for me to do that because
it's real.
A great many of our profound practices are still not appropriate for popular consumption. It's just,
I get it.
Yeah.
So
that was really the main contemplation for me.
Right.
It was, okay. This is a part of our historical narrative. This is a real part of life.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows death. Everybody knows love.
Right.
Everyone on planet Earth.
Right.
We know death. We know loss. We know love. We know victory.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can celebrate and commiserate together.
Right.
In terms of human.
Right. Well, and that scene really holds all that, right? It holds this, sorrow, death, love. It's all there because we know what it's been. We all know what it feels like to be at a funeral or at a funeral service or something like that. It's just that this one got to be seen through the lens of kānaka, and that's why the impact is there. The impact is there. For sure.
And we forget. I mean, ceremony and protocol aside, typically, the kahuna is the one who is hands on in a lot of it, because you want to maintain the smell and the essence and the energy of death off of. You want to keep it to a certain amount of people and involved in the entire process of grief, loss, and eventually death and burial. And so what do you still need in the scene to make it appropriate enough but impactful?
Yeah.
And it has to. In terms of the conversation of iwi kupuna, I wish people would be a little bit more active in the way that because we deal with it now. Every time somebody wants to make a new development or a new hotel or a new golf course or a new Western American attraction or tourist trap, we find iwi kupuna. Right. So this conversation is, it's as relevant as it was then in antiquity as it is now. These conversations are happening.
Right.
That was my resolve. I was like, no, people should be less superstitious and less squeamish around the traditional reciprocity of death and how we deal with death and how we deal with the death of our loved ones and their physical bodies and how we reintern them, not just disposed of them.
Yeah, no, that's why it was so wonderful, and the work that you put into that, I was very, very. I mean, I've used this a lot, just our appreciation and all of that. It feels redundant, but, no less impact. I mean, it's very true. Well, you had asked me, why is there not more hula? Why is there not hula? And this was just me. This was just me trying to have a response to the way that the world views us and the way they look at us, that in season 1, I didn't want to have surfing or hula.
The tropes.
Yeah.
The tropes.
I didn't want those in season 1. It doesn't mean that I don't want them. But we had a back and forth about this because you made a very relevant point. And that point was, but hula was a part of everything. For us, the show doesn't end with season 1.
No.
Right? And so now it was just a personal thing to say, I just want to avoid the tropes so that when we do introduce them, now they feel like they're truly something more than just what I've seen in Waikiki or what I have seen, done, in California on a board. And, like I wanted to suspend those types of things so that when they are presented, now they feel very Hawaiian, that's just, I could be wrong about that.
No, I understood it. I think it was necessary to set up the story for these characters and set the foundational storyline first, and then in the process, as it evolves, so does it record itself, starts to become historical. In the context of hula. Hula, now that these wars have happened, now they get added into the historical record.
Yeah. And I think it's a fun progression because we often think about, okay, like if this is our season, if we move on to more story, we want to fill it with things that feel new, and things that feel, how can we keep immersing the audience into more and more Hawaiian, as opposed to like, let's just throw everything at them.
It would also be, I think, an overload, cranial overload, if there was hula and that much stimulation, because there's already a lot of war energy, and anytime people are together, there's the village scenes and then there's the war scenes. So I don't think it could have developed any other way. And in the end, I 1000% agreed with you guys.
Oh, that was the great communications that we could have, right? Like understanding each other and trying to find what is the middle ground, or when we lean your way, when we lean our way, like that's really what it was. And that's what we need, as we move forward.
But if not us, if not Kanaka directors, if not Kanaka script writers, not Kanaka producers, who else has the license to do this, to reimagine, not interpret, we're not reinterpreting anything, reimagining what the discourse, because we don't know what they said to each other. We don't. Nobody was there. We know the general happenings. We know a basic outline, and through mele, a little bit more of the discourse. But all of that to me is in the realm of creative license. We don't know what they said in dialogue together. So that kind of stuff we can build on. That kind of stuff you can reimagine. And to that point, if we cannot do it as Kanaka for our own stories, who else has the license to do so?
Right. So I wanted to have a discussion about, all of these things you did behind the scenes. But the truth is, you did something huge that everybody gets to experience in this show. And this is really where, like, to be honest, this is where a lot of people they're gonna know your involvement. And, and I'm very proud to have this discussion. But I first wanted to make sure that people understood that, you weren't brought in for like a singular purpose, but the one thing that your really strong contribution to this show was in the music. Can we please talk about that? Please.
Hey, Hansi. Hansi.
Yeah, we asked you.
Oh my God.
To, because when we knew we were going to work with Hans Zimmer, right? He was so wonderful, by the way, just in our initial conversations with him, and his acceptance to work on a television series.
He doesn't do series.
Yeah, he doesn't do.
He does full motion pictures, full docuseries.
Yeah, and that's where his fan base lies. That's what his strength has always been there.
And he has many Academy Awards and Golden Globe.
And he wanted to be a part of this. And Jason and I knew that the real success in the music landscape of this show was going to be in working with you. So we highlighted all these other things that it has pulled you to be a part of the project. But realistically, the one thing, the strongest part that we knew that you could contribute was going to be with music. What was that like working with us?
Yeah, in fact, you said that. Even before I started doing the overall cultural consultation, costuming, and in on some of the production meetings with respect to some of the script rewrites and the sites, was the music. You specifically said, I want you to be involved in the music. We don't know how just yet.
Right.
Things are
We didn't know how the deals were going to be structured. We didn't know what Hans Zimmer's expectations were, what his demands were going to be, but we just knew that it had to be, and we were able to pull it off. Look, from the openings to, I mean, look, people's first connections to the music are in the teaser trailer, but really, like, our opening title sequence, the soundscape throughout each episode, and then honestly, like, one of the strongest and most beautiful parts of the music comes to this fullness in episode 8. I mean, it's just so beautiful, and it just takes us really, so it has the Kaumakaiwa flow throughout the series. I was lucky enough to go into the studio when you had, all of them there.
Oh yeah, that's right. I didn't want to.
I was so excited. I just remember recording while you guys were chanting and doing all of that. I remember recording it and sending it to Jason. I'm like, dude, we're here. Like, we're here. And it was so nice, is that when you pulled together and was able to create and help build this thing, that it's gonna be that thing that is steady and that holds the story together, and that allows audiences to feel completely immersed. Like, that's just the thing about music. It's just the thing about
the immersive.
It becomes immersive. It becomes the point in the story that really pulls you into a character. It pulls you into the tension and the drama. And
if I haven't made it clear ever before, whether it's on a concert that I've done or a symposium or a panel discussion, is exactly that. We could have given them an incredible cinematic experience of visually, but music?
Right.
This is why music and dance is imperative to the human condition, because music and dance both are the only, in my mind, and I'll preach it till the day I die, are the only natural resources that the human body can produce without first depleting from or destroying something else in order to get that. We don't need to pull from another resource to pule. We don't need to destroy more aina or develop more aina to ori. We don't have to go and give testimony for a legislation and into law to hula and to ritualize our ʻike Hawaii. It's the only natural resource that we are capable of producing. This body, this human vessel is capable of producing without taking away, without destroying. Even at the best of us, our aloha aina requires some kind of taking from resources. In order for us to have a lo'i for our kalo farmers, we have to clear forests.
Right.
We have to dig land. We manipulate the land. We manipulate water. We manipulate those resources. And so we have to re-divert it and reimagine it in our image in order to benefit from that. But oli, hula, mele, Hawaii, you don't need any of that. All that's required is this. And again, it is the only natural resource that the human body can produce without destroying or depleting another resource or that of aina. Doesn't cost anything for aina. It doesn't cost aina anything to give that to us. Right. And yet we can produce it. And somehow we don't treat this, somehow it's entertainment. It went from natural resource, mele and oli and hula, somehow got dumbed down, and it went from ritual, ceremony, mimicry of nature, to natural resource, and now it's entertainment. Everybody knows, as long as you have a pulse in your body, you know beat, you know pahu, you know boom, 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 boom. You don't need to be taught that. No human being does. This is why music and dance and vocalizations is imperative to the whole of the human condition, the entire of the human condition. And that's that's one of the universal laws and universal lessons that Hawaii has to remind the world of, the rest of the world. So,
well, if anybody's voice is going to do that, it's yours. Mahalo.
Thank you, Grandma. I am glad as scholastic as my family is, we do have our hardships. I mean, would I, as a Native Hawaiian mahu, person of color, a minority in a minority in a minority, born and raised with a single mother on a Native Hawaiian homestead in relative poverty, there were some rough years, to then look back into her future. If that's not a contradiction of terms, looking back into her future, and then seeing now 43-year-old her collaborating with composers like Hans Zimmer and creative kānaka like you and Jason. If that's not working on behalf of your people and living out your fullest indigenous potential, I don't know what is. So for a lot of my creative pursuits, this film experience and this series has been the culmination of a lot of that. Of Edith Kanakaʻole, with a 6th grade education, deciding that wasn't going to be enough for her, that wasn't good enough. And for her having survived after being stillborn. And then against prejudice in the university system and a 6th grade education, having founded and established the University of Hawaii College of Hawaiian Studies system. And then her daughter dedicating her entire life to the repatriation of her people's bones and to the education of her people, to her daughter at first defying all odds, getting pregnant with me at 15. My father was 16. They were both in the homestead, forced to get married because it was the time. The lineage of my journey has informed every note and every poetic line and every composition. And this film experience has been the culmination of that. Thank you, Edith. Thank you, Edith. Thank you, Kekuewa. Thank you, Keleko and Kapeliela. Thank you, Naholoa'a. Thank you, Peleni Iaka. Thank you, Pua and Nalani. Thank you, Kekohi. And thank you, and Jason. I know that this film journey was never meant to be the Hawaiian story, but one of many, and in the hope that we inspire more storytellers. And this is just one of what hopefully will become an entire forward movement of Hawaiian storytellers, because mo'oka'ao is the sinew. Like mele is the sinew of the soundscape to a film score, so is mo'oka'ao to our kānaka hood, to our kānaka living, to our life way, to our ʻike kānaka maoli, to our ʻike Hawaii. As imperative as music and dance is to the human condition, we need the natural source of mo'oka'ao, and that's what you guys do. You're one mo'o of the many mo'o, one ka'ao vessel of the many mo'o in the lineage of mythology weavers.
I mean, this is really an opportunity to have you come here. Is really just a mahalo to you, and on behalf of both Jason and I. And Chief of War really is it is the collective, and you're very much a part of that. And so I just wanted to ask you here, spend a little bit of time. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you guys for allowing me even to grow, the space to grow. I needed to evolve in this industry and in this space.
We should hear from you. You know what I mean? And I'm happy to hear from you. So mahalo for making the time. Thank you so much. Aloha to you. Love you. Thank you so much. Mahalo nui to our viewers and listeners for joining us as we dug deeper into the brilliance and burdens of Hawaii's chiefs beyond what was experienced in the Chief of War show. I'm Pa'akai Sibbett. Until next time, aloha.